Even if most products get forgotten by the media after the review period is done, there are a few that stand out. Gadgets that people still ask about months later, some that we even decide to hold on to as daily drivers, and that we see age over time. The iPhone XS is one of them. It's hard to deny how common it is for Apple to dominate the rumor mill, and as we get close to a very controversial iPhone 11, it's only fitting that we revisit the current flagship and see how well it aged. I mean, this is one of the most expensive phones money can buy, so you'd assume that it would be the one that looks best nearly a year later, right? Well, not so much. I'm Jaime Rivera with Pocket Now, and this is the iPhone XS After the Buzz. I'm going to start this video with a confession. I don't really revisit iPhones for an After the Buzz video. As a matter of fact, this phone has been either in my pocket or in my bag for most of the year, and it's for a few very important reasons. First is social media. I mean, part of our coverage demands Instagram stories, and iPhones offer better quality video, and the color accuracy of their displays enables more precise photo editing. Second, the Sennheiser microphone that I use for every single Pocket Now daily requires a lightning connector, so there's that. And third, the Apple Watch Series 4, which continues to be my favorite watch. This is why I stick to the smallest iPhone of the bunch, as it makes for a perfect secondary phone when I'm reviewing something else. Now, my experience of using the iPhone XS for a year has been a mixed bag. I do like the feel of this phone and how easy it is to handle. It is heavier than most phones of its size, and is a tad wider, but I think that its screen size matched with the very minor bezels is a sweet spot for one-handed use. I've never really had to rely on reachability to navigate through menus, so using this phone on a heavy commute never really felt like a chore. Now, I have to admit, I've spent most of the year being paranoid. This is the first time that I don't purchase AppleCare Plus, and it was by accident, and I do know how expensive it is to replace the front, and how even more expensive it is to replace the back, and I've become really bad at babying phones lately. So as an alternative, it's the main reason why it's been tucked in a case from Muzhou all this time. I love their leather cases. They age far better than Apple's own offerings, and even though I've dropped this phone, nothing really major has happened to it. As opposed to the scratches in the stainless steel of the iPhone X, this phone has none, and the back is also intact. The front is the problem though. There are significant scratches at the top and at the bottom, and it was mainly because there was one time when I was carrying it next to a Pixel 3, and the camera lens of the Pixel 3 was the one that made the scratches. Big mistake. I know that Apple claims that this is the hardest glass that they've ever made, but that's not true. I mean, I've dropped the Galaxy Note 9 from a table on its face, and the phone is just fine. Now, if it wasn't for the glass, the Super Retina has been one of my favorites this year. I've used OLEDs from other companies that claim better refresh rates, which you could call more advanced, but which I call pointless if they struggle with the brightness. Whether it's in a dark room or in direct sunlight, I love how well this display adapts, and how accurate colors are. 34 grams heavier. The stereo speakers have also been solid, so content consumption has been ideal. And I know right about now you want to hear my complaints about the notch, which, yes, are annoying, but only in certain scenarios. Even in 18:9 video, the screen adapts well so it doesn't bother you. It's not until you move into things like 21:9 that it gets crazy. So for those of you that wonder why we haven't made the jump to other aspect ratios, it has a lot to do with the fact that there are a ton of phones with notches today that don't do a good job, or at least not as good as this phone. Internally, what powers this display has also aged well. Apple's 7nm A12 Bionic is still one of the most powerful processors of 2019, even if launched in 2018. The 4 gigs of RAM have proven to be enough for me to never see this phone stutter, and I mean like never, and essentials like IP68 water and dust resistance and wireless charging have proven to be pleasant additions. Now, what didn't age well is the 64 gigs of storage that you get when you go for the entry-level iPhone. I mean, sure, you've got more efficient photos and videos, but once you add podcasts and music, definitely 64 gigs does not make sense, and even more at a time when no company charges so much money for so little storage at the entry level. And as for the battery, well, let's just say that it mostly ended the day just fine, but keep in mind this phone was mostly my crutch. I don't think that people who only rely on it could survive a day without the tank being in fumes. Now, if you remember, there was a ton of controversy over iOS 12.1.2 and the whole Qualcomm versus Apple debacle. It did affect connectivity for a bit, which in turn hurt the battery life a lot. I did notice signal performance and data speeds got better after the settlement though, so you can rest assured that at least that part is fine. And speaking of iOS, I'm one of the few people that's not really testing iOS 13 public beta, and it's mainly to do because I depend on this phone for work, and I don't want to risk reliability over just a few new tricks. Seriously, the major upgrade is focused on the iPad, which will be part of the next After the Buzz coming soon. Really, iOS 12 has been all about making old phones faster, and this wasn't one of them. For me, it translated more to the experience of having a phone that could excel on any task, and it did. I never used Memoji, like ever. The only thing that I enjoyed using was screen time, but given my use of multiple phones, it never really became something that I relied on. It is sad that the widget home screen approach of iPadOS 13 isn't making it here, which only means that if you're bored of the usual grid of icons, there's enough of that here for another year. Now, the camera is a total different story for me. I remember being so disappointed with the iPhone X, and I feel that Apple really addressed all of my complaints with the iPhone XS. And it's really not about the specs, it's more about the fact that Apple's smarter HDR is kind of epic. For the first time in years, I'm back to posting photos from my iPhone on Instagram. Colors really pop, saturation is not overdone, and the improved dynamic range has really compelled me to trust this phone in many scenarios. Even when in low light, the performance is not overbearing, the phone balances highlights really well, with the obvious standard limitations of a typical phone. This also continues to be by far my favorite smartphone for video recording. If I had to pick one phone to assist me with any sort of short video, this is the one. 4K at 60 is epic, stabilization is great, and best of all, just the codec that Apple uses makes the quality of video look far better than some of the over-sharpening and warping that I've noticed with competing phones. There are things where this camera is dated, sadly. Do I wish it had a wide angle? Yes. I will admit that in 2019, Android flagships have me spoiled. The telephoto is one of my favorites for street photography though. The 2x crop has proved to be quite useful for that particular scenario. Sadly, when doing portraits, the crop factor towards your subject is insane. I've noticed that Apple has made some significant improvements, but having to step back is quite annoying. And it's honestly the same way that I feel about selfies. I mean, while Apple does a commendable job with them, the crop factor is my least favorite thing about them. And sure, for selfie video, this phone does enable some epic stabilization, but having it limited to 1080p in this day and age is the reason why I don't use it. To conclude, I think that it's rather clear why I'm mixed using this iPhone after the buzz. I love the design approach, I love the feel. I will admit that I'm guilty as charged for being locked into the Apple ecosystem. I find it fascinating how Apple is able to do that. If you were to use a Sony phone, there's really no benefit in using a Sony pair of earbuds or headphones. But with Apple, it's a different story. There's actually a benefit in having more than one device. Features like AirDrop are crucial for me during video editing. Having iCloud sync my information across devices is also genius. If my laptop of choice is a 15-inch MacBook Pro, my tablet of choice continues to be an iPad Pro 11-inch, my smartwatch of choice is an Apple Watch Series 4, naturally, the best way to interact with them is to stick to an iPhone. Now, is this phone worth $1,000? No, I feel that it's not. The hardware hasn't aged well, and even if the software feels fluid, it still looks dated, and I do feel that the camera could use some improvements. But really, what annoys me the most about this phone is the amount of storage you get. 64 gigabytes for so much money feels like such a ripoff. Do I recommend the iPhone XS after the buzz? Not really. Even if you were to try to find deals on Amazon for this phone, you won't find any. Listen, the next iPhone is just around the corner, and I think it would be best for you to wait for that one, even if I also feel that that particular device won't be worth $1,000 either. What about you? How do you feel about the iPhone XS after months of use? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, follow us on social medias. Our extended coverage happens on Instagram, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. You can also follow me on my personal handles to see how I test this phone in the real world. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like what you saw. I'm Jaime Rivera. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.